Alright, so here's our next day of notes. This was the first one that I was not here for at all. The other one, or 1-2, I was here for at least part of the notes process. I think for A day, not for B. So here's our warm-up. What is the value of x and AB if B is between A and C? And we have AB is equal to 3x plus 2, BC is equal to 7, and the whole thing, AC, is 8x minus 1. So all we have to do here is add AB and BC together, set it equal, AB and BC, yeah, that's what I said, and set it equal to AC. So that means we have 3x plus 2 plus BC, so plus 7, equal to 8x minus 1. So 3x, the 2 and 7 can add together, so that's going to be 9. 3x plus 9 is equal to 8x minus 1. Let's subtract 3x from both sides. And 9 is equal to 5x minus 1. And we're going to add 1 to both sides. And 9 plus 1 is just 10. So 10 is equal to 5x. We divide by 5. And x is equal to 2. So there's one of our answers. It says to find x and AB. So now we have to take that and plug it back in. For what AB is. So we're going to plug 2 in for x as 3 times 2 plus 2. And we know that that is what AB is, right? So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 2, this is AB again. And 6 plus 2 is 8. There's our AB. And that's it. We don't have any units, so we don't have any units to put on these numbers. Number 2, we're going to add these fractions. So we're finding the length of the entire thing. So 2 and 5/8 plus 5 and 3/4. First thing we got to do is change them from mixed numbers into improper fractions. So 2 times 8 is 16. 16 plus 5 is 21 over 8. Plus 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 3 is 23 over 4. Now we need a common denominator. So 21 over 8 plus 23 over 4. Our common denominator is going to be 8. So 4 times 2 gets us 8. 23 times 2 is going to be 46. So now we just add across the top. 21 plus 46 is going to be 67. 67 divided by 8. So now, sorry about that, late buses are getting ready to roll out of here, so kids need to get on the bus. So now, 67, 8 goes into that 8 times evenly, and all we're left with is 3 from the 64, 3/8. So 8 and 3/8. Alright, so now let's get into these notes. So our first thing, we were working on vocab. Hopefully you guys had finished that and turned them in. Some of you did, some of you definitely did not. So our vocab words for today, midpoint and segment bisector. And that's actually it. So here's our first midpoint formula. This formula has to do with being on a number line. So it's basically just taking the average of the 2 points and dividing, so the average of them, and that's our distance, or where the midpoint is. So let's use this formula. Our first example, Marco places a couch so that its end is perpendicular and 2.5 feet away from the wall. The couch is 90 inches wide. How far is the midpoint of the couch back from the wall in feet? So what we're going to do is draw a little picture. So here's the wall, here's the couch. So this is the 90 here, and this little gap here is the 2.5. So, but that is 90 inches, right? So we need to, we want our answer in feet, so we want the 90 inches to be in feet as well. So what we do is take our 90, we divide by how many inches are in a foot. So 12, and it's 7.5 feet. So now we have everything in feet. So what we're going to do is take our endpoints. So we know one endpoint of the couch is 2.5 feet away from the wall. We know the other endpoint is 2.5 feet plus the 7.5. So we add 2.5 feet to this. We get 10 feet from the wall for our other endpoint. So plus 10. Then we divide by 2. And 2.5 plus 10 is 12.5. Divide by 2. And we get 6.25. Now we're talking about feet, so this is feet. Make sure we include our units. Always important to include our units. The next one, we have a drag strip, quarter-mile drag strip. We want to find how many feet from the finish line the midpoint is of the racing strip. So first off, you need to know that there are 5,280 feet in a mile. And we're going to multiply that by the quarter mile to figure out how many feet there are in a quarter mile. So really we just divide this by 4, and that comes out to be 1,320 feet. And that's in a quarter mile. So now what we need to do, since that's a quarter mile, an eighth of a mile, so the midpoint is what we're looking for. We're going to take this 1,320 and divide by 2. And that comes out to be 660 feet. Okay, here's our midpoint formula for in the coordinate plane. So if you're given coordinates of 2 points, you just use the x values, you add the x values and divide by 2, so you basically get the average of the x values. Then you do the same thing for the y values, and whatever you get for your two averages are your new point. That's your midpoint. So here we have two coordinates. We want to find the average of our x values, average of our y values, and that is going to be our midpoint. So our midpoint is that the x values are -2 and -8. So -2 plus -8 divided by 2. And the y values, 3 and -9. 3 plus -9 divided by 2. So this is going to turn into -2 plus -8 is -10 over 2. And 3 plus -9 is -6 over 2. So finally, we're at our last step. -10 divided by 2 is -5, and -6 divided by 2 is -3. And that's our midpoint. Now, sometimes you won't have that easy. Here we are given our midpoint. We want to find our other end. So what we're going to do is break this down x and y as opposed to just doing it all together like we did on the last problem. We know that x1 plus our x2, which can be our coordinates for s, so -1 divided by 2. We know this has to equal 8 because that's the x coordinate for our midpoint. And same thing for the y's. So y1 plus our y2, which is going to be the 5 from our s coordinate. And then we divide that by 2 and equal to our midpoint's y coordinate, -3. We're going to multiply both sides of both of these equations by 2. So we'll cancel on the left side. Then we're left with x1 plus -1 equal to 8 times 2 is 16. And we're left with y1 plus 5 equal to -3 times 2 is -6. Now we're going to add 1 to both sides on the left equation, since our y is negative. So x1 comes out to be 17. And we're going to subtract 5 on the right side, and -6 minus 5 is -11. So our coordinate for R is 17, negative 11. So here's our next one. We have this line here. We know that B is the midpoint. And since B is the midpoint, we know both sides from A to B is 2A minus 1, as well as what's labeled B to C as 2A minus 1. So that means we have two 2A minus 1s equal to 3A plus 1. So now we can solve for A and plug it back in to find what AC is. So that's going to distribute the 2. 2 times 2 is 4A. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. 3A equal to 3A plus 1. And subtract 3A from both sides. So we end up with A minus 2 is equal to 1. Then we add 2 to both sides. And A is equal to 3. So now we're not looking for what A is, we need it to find what AC is. So AC is equal to the 3A plus 1. We know what A is now, 3. So we can substitute that in. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1. So AC is 10. And we don't have units, so that is it. Our next one here, we're trying to find a portion of a line, a distance from N to M. So the way this works is you want to know the X distance from N to M, then you look for the Y distance from N to M, and then you use those both multiplied by 1/5, and you'll get your new coordinate after you add it to the N coordinates. So let me show you what I mean by all that. So we know that N is at negative 3 for the X value, M is at 2, so the distance there, so we're going to use the distance formula, but for on a line, right, we can do that. So distance is going to be negative 3 minus 2, the absolute value of that, so that's the absolute value of negative 5, or 5. So that's the D for the X's. D for the Y's, the absolute value of negative 3 minus 3, or the absolute value of negative 6, which is 6. So now we're going to take our distances, so dx, we're going to multiply it by 1/5, the fraction away from n that we're looking for. So that's going to be 5 times 1/5. So the 5's will basically cancel here, and we're just left with 1. So that's the X distance that S is going to be. So this is our SX. The S value for Y, or the Y value for S, sorry, is dy times 1/5 equal to 6 times 1/5, which is 6 over 5. Also known as 1.2. So now we're going to take our individual values here, Sx and Sy, and we're going to add them to n. So nx plus Sx is negative 3 plus 1, which is just 2. So that's actually our coordinate for S. Sorry. Not labeling things as I should be, but that's okay, as long as we know what we're looking for. So that's negative 3 again, plus 1.2, so negative 1.8. So our coordinate for S is these two values. That should be negative 2, by the way. Forgot that. Negative 2, negative 1.8. And there's our coordinate. So that's our last problem. Let's have our exit ticket. We did some book problems that day. There's the exit ticket. Find the midpoint of those 2 points.